time is so precious, and so I am managing it like a mom. Senator Herr, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you.
We have your bill before you, and we'd asked people to come back to testify. So Mary Robinson from the DNR is here if you'd like to proceed, and then we're going to make sure we're clear about what's in this proposal.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Mary Robinson, Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Natural Resources. I will be brief. I'm just here to support this bill on behalf of the Department of Natural Resources. Certainly, the DNR supports the extension of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, specifically regarding the language on the community grants program that the DNR, funding that the DNR would be appropriated. We have had the opportunity to work with the authors of this bill throughout the process, and we're confident that the language as amended in the A12 will support us establishing this program in a way that can be both a model for environmental justice practices and grant making in terms of lowering barriers to participation, as well as making sure that we have the appropriate fiscal controls in place as we would be the accountable and responsible state agency. And I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Robinson. Thank you for your patience.
My pleasure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Senator Herr, you have a witness who is going to walk us through the proposal.
Could I walk through the changes? Yes, I defer this to Nell to walk us through. Nell Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Nels Paulson, Policy Director at Conservation Minnesota. And we've been working with Senator Herr and the large coalition in hand-in-hand as we amend this bill through the process. And I was just going to highlight the 7 changes that the A12 amendment did. The first, it removes the increase in percentage of net proceeds of the state lottery that must be credited to the fund. The percentage will remain at 40%, which is the current percentage of net proceeds that are credited to the fund. The second change in the A12 amendment, it adds a sunset for the transfer of lottery proceeds to the ENRTF to expire in 2050. The third change in the amendment, it modifies the ballot question to remove the reference to a change in the percentage, since the percentage will remain at 40%. The fourth change, it modifies the community grants program to include changes per the recommendations from the DNR to administer the program more efficiently. Changes include removing references to partner organizations and adding the Pollution Control Agency as an entity that must be consulted on advisory council appointments. The next change, we modified the membership of the advisory council to ensure that the council is sufficiently representative of various communities in the state. The next change removes the transfer of all unclaimed prize money from the ENRTF. All unclaimed prize money will continue to flow to the general fund as it is today. And the last change adds financial review of grant and business subsidy recipients to ensure grant accountability. And this is the language that has been going on a number of grant-making bills. And those are all the changes in the A12.
Thank you very much, Senator Herr.
Well, member, this is something we're going to pass and put on a ballot, and I really need your support. This funding going to help us continue to protect and conserve our land, our airs, and water and wildlife for our state. That's why we take pride in living in the great state of Minnesota due to the quality of air, water that we breathe here. So I'm glad that this provision was in place long before I served in the Senate since 1988, and it's been renewed a number of times, with strong voter supports, and we'll continue that tradition again this time. And I'm honored to be part of this time based from now to the future, and ask for your support.
Members, do you have questions? Senator Anderson.
Madam Chair, I'd like a roll call on this bill.
Roll call's been requested. Are there other questions? Senator Coran.
Madam Chair and members, so could you tell me, just describe the membership changes? You said the membership changes here were, describe the membership of the existing task force, and then describe the membership of the new task force.
Senator Herr.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I defer that to Nell to explain a little bit thoroughly.
Madam Chairman, can we have this? as everybody knows, these rooms are horrible acoustically. Could we have the testifiers at least testify into the, speak louder and testify into the microphone, and if we can, turn the volume up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks for that question, Senator. The membership of the advisory council can be found on, starting on line 4.7. And the advisory council has 2 members who are members of the Ojibwe tribe, 2 members who are members of the Dakota tribe, 4 members who identify as Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Pacific Islander, or as a member of community of color. And then there's a few other clauses that asks the commissioner of the DNR to make sure that the advisory council has equal representation from rural, suburban, and urban communities. And this is a new council that the bill is setting up. Currently, there is not a community grants advisory council.
Madam Chair? And to testify, it was sold as modifications to the, modification to the task force. And I guess maybe from the original language, it probably is. With the total numbers, is it 11? What is the total numbers that the commission has proposed in the legislation here today?
Mr. Paulson?
There are at least 11 members that the commission needs to appoint. There's also discretion for 8 additional members, and that is to make sure that the advisory council represents all of Minnesota. And it's at the commissioner's discretion on those between 11 and 19 members.
Madam Chair?
Senator Coran.
And I can appreciate that. I always get concerned with the, I have yet to see citizen memberships, citizen appointees that actually are random citizens that get chosen in those areas. And so very prescriptive. And if in one aspect, we're very prescriptive in who must participate and get representation. And I've heard the discrepancies, the parks are underutilized from the other testifier, and that we're moving towards the environmental justice component. What we want is representation of everybody. And if it's specifically, or you have to explicitly call out certain groups, then why don't we prescribe all of them? Because I have very little trust in the administration and the agencies as well. And we're trying to get through that, especially when it relates to grants, that there are citizens that aren't already attached to this process. We have so many nonprofits, and this will just breed more, that are there for a self-serving need. And we have little transparency, and we have, in most cases, we end up with very little transparency to the citizens and actually full representation. And so I get concerned. We call out about everybody, and if we're going to start adding more of these, which we have, this is another new one. We have 130-some commissions and task forces today. We're going to have, there's another 10 agencies and task force and commissions. Removing the legislature from the process, right? Those are extraordinarily influential positions. And that's what I have a concern about. So if we're going to be prescriptive, then do it. Put everybody on there. I don't care whether the ethnicity, race, or whatever it is. Put them all on there if it's important. Because this whole, our parks are underutilized by segments of the population. I would agree. Are we going to force parents to go take their children to our parks and our natural resources? I don't think so. Do we provide education for everybody? I think we do that. Yet in the same sentence, you say there's a whole host of discrepancies or disparities. Go to St. Paul. I grew up in St. Paul. Go to Como Park. The most diverse park you'll see. People pick up a piece of land and utilize it at an amazing rate. And so I get concerned with those statements and what are the real intentions and goals of these changes. And I have little faith that citizens will be appointed that reflect the entire population of Minnesota. So if you're going to do it, be prescriptive, then prescribe a membership body that actually reflects all of Minnesota. So for those reasons, I struggle. We don't need any more task forces and commissions that absolve or remove the role of the legislature from these processes. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Coran. Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend and thank and congratulate the author and the huge coalition that came together to support this effort. I think the addition of the community grants is a really important change, and I guess I would differ on the perspective on the advisory council. I think it's a very important part of that process and is written to include the wholeness of our state. Historically, people who can't afford to have a lobbyist or organizations that have been around for a long time have been able to have had better access to these funds. And so this is a really well thought out way to expand access to this grant money. So no question, I just wanted to thank the author and the coalition.
Senator McQuaid.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think some of the comments that we've heard in this committee reflect things that we've heard in other committees. And it's like really specific and targeted at the inclusion of Black and Indigenous and Hispanic and Asian members of Minnesota who are not only often left out of these processes, but are like systematically left out. Like the systems were specifically designed to not include us. They were specifically designed to make sure that we are left out. And so when we create councils and commissions to specifically include those members, it's to recognize that we wrote policies and laws and had norms and all of these practices that were specifically designed to do the opposite. And so if we're trying to fix some of the disparities, which are not, like the reasons why are not unknowable, we know why people underutilize certain natural resources, whether it was the decimating of entire communities and neighborhoods that had, public space and green space for people to access, or, the systematic stealing of land from people who were fishing and harvesting wild rice and all of that. Or if parents feel like they have to be incredibly controlling of their children because they don't feel like they're safe out in community. And so these are not unknowable things. We have heard these things from parents who have testified before our committees. We've heard them from community members who live in our state. And I just really want us to move away from this, really insidious insinuation that by purposefully including the people that we have left out, we're somehow not including the voice of Minnesotans. And so I appreciate, Senator Herr, the work that you have done and the work with stakeholders to do this, that is recognizing where the problems are and specifically designing a council to not do that anymore and to do it better and to do it right. So I appreciate the work, and this is really important. And Minnesotans have approved this so many times because we really, really love this part about our state. It is part of our state identity, no matter if you're white, Indigenous, Black, Asian, Hispanic, so on and so forth. So I'm so grateful to you for this work, and I know it's been a lot of stakeholder work and a lot of legislative work to get here. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further
Madam
questions. Senator
Chair.
Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I challenge Senator McQuaid and any other senator or citizen to find out where we have excluded these groups of people that have been identified and divided out as the Democrats in this bill are dividing Minnesotans like they have in so many things that have come before this legislature. There is nowhere in statute that we have prescribed this type of membership based on a person's color or their ethnicity or anything else and excluded them. I challenge somebody to find that where we have done that, because that rhetoric is getting old because it's not true. And we can try to put up this straw man and pretend that it's happening and use it to legitimize what we have in the bill, but it's not true. And I don't know if members of the public are watching, but using some of the discussion we've had with some of the other councils, 82% of Minnesota is white. And I don't know, I guess maybe I'd ask the testifier, where can white people be a member of this council, and how many of them who are not? We've got in the bill on 4.12, 2 members of the Ojibwe tribe, on 4.13, 2 members of the Dakota tribe, and then 4.14, 4 members who identify as Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Pacific Islander, or as a member of a community of color. So that's members, Madam Chair, 4, 6, 8 members who are identified specifically by the color of their skin in this bill. So where are the rest of the colors? And are we making certain that we apportion, because that's what you guys are doing in this bill, are we going to apportion people properly to the population in Minnesota? When we start doing that, if that's the path you're going to go down, then let's be accurate, because this is not. So I guess I would ask, Senator Herr or others who are testifying for this bill, what about the 82%? Where do they fit in here?
Senator Herr, and before you proceed, I will just share as I look at the language in the amendment that we've adopted, that when we talk about members of the Ojibwe tribe or members of the Dakota tribe or others, that this is not a reference to the color of people's skin, but instead to the wholeness of what that lived experience brings to this work, which enriches the work not only of this council, but enriches the work of those whom they advise. And so I think it is important to think about the references here not as the color of a skin, but instead a cultural, historic, lived experience that is important when we think about the work of Minnesota and of this body that we're talking about today. Senator Herr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm, for one, our senator, our legislator, a person who try not to be redundant, and I really hear good remarks from Senator Morrison and Senator McQuay, and I disagree with, the other remarks as well. But if we want to go and specify the majority, if we want to go that route, just ask yourself whether we really want to name the color of the majority ethnic group here. And what does that say about our state? Our state is open for all. And so this is just to bring people into the process so they can help us make a holistic decision so that we can better serve those who are left unserved. And let me just point out that this year, we have total of 10 Asian Americans who are member of legislature. We had 10 members in the Senate that are people of color. And whether we open the door or not, this is the emerging community that will be part of our body and will be serving and will make decision for all of us to make sure our state progress well. And so I think that we are making decision, if reflecting on that. Do we want to the point where they, do we want to wait till the point where the community of color come and challenging us that we're not including them? Or do we want to figure out a way where we decided or discuss among group of people that we should be more inclusive? And so I think this language alone is open room for more people. It's 19 people total. Right now, it's required for 11 people. And when the 11 people felt that there's certain diversity, a certain member of our community by region or by culture, by ethnicity, that is not included in this process, that will help us make judgment on the project that will be coming to the Environmental Trust Fund. That I trust that board of 11 will trying to recruit more people so that we can have a pool of diversity to help us better the project that's coming forth for the Environmental Trust Fund. So, and I appreciate comment on the other side too, which allow us to engage and be conscientious and improve the betterment of our state. So thank you.
Morrison.
So, Madam Chair, I think I still have.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Herr. Well, members, and I'm understanding the language a little better now, knowing I couldn't add up 11, and Senator Herr, you said 19, so I see there's a paragraph A and a paragraph B, and now it makes sense, 11 from paragraph A, 3 of which are not specified. So we specify 8 out of the 3, and Madam Chair, The word black is found on 4.14 of the bill. That's a color. And the reality is, we are, in this language, dividing people into groups. We are dividing Minnesota. And that's not working towards a one Minnesota. A one Minnesota would be colorblind, it would be group blind, it would, ideally, it would be geography blind. And it would just say, MPCA or Commissioner of Health or whoever's appointing these people, appoint 11 people and take resumes from everybody. That would be the approach that we should do. And if they all end up to be all black people or all white people or all Indian people or whoever, or some mix of those, then all of them are equally having the opportunity to be represented on here. The way it's written, the majority is excluding the biggest segment of, groups of people, Madam Chair, or colors, or however you want to say it, because you've got both in the bill. Point well taken, Madam Chair. It says Ojibwe tribe or Dakota tribe. It doesn't say color. But on the next area, it does have a color. And you're dividing people. That's the reality. And dividing people, Madam Chair, members, dividing people doesn't bring them together. This is going the other direction. This is segregating people. I had another, can I come around again? I've got a question on a different part of the bill. Maybe Senator Morrison wants to talk, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. And in the context of this proposal, black is not a color, but it is Black Americans, which is a group. And it's interesting, we've covered this terrain, and Senator Klein is here and waiting to do his bill. And this is not new terrain for this committee, Senator Klein, as you wait, but important. When I look at this, and I hear what you're saying, Senator Drazkowski, but when I look at this, I don't think about divisions, I think about inclusion. I think about the oneness, the wholeness of all of who we are. And so I appreciate the difference in perspective, but just want to add a different perspective, that it isn't about segregating, but instead about making sure that more voices, more different voices, more diverse voices are included in this important work. So, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to try to say what Chair Hurd said so eloquently, so I don't think I need to repeat it. But my point really was, this is an advisory council, and it's bringing people together. It's not dividing people.
Thank you. Senator McQuaid? Senator Hurd?
I'm good unless you want me to make a conclusion. And,
I'll get to you.
Yeah.
We're not quite there yet. Senator Barr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, maybe I'm just reading this incorrectly, but the bill throughout on the DE here keeps talking about the commissioner shall make awards or grant awards based on different criteria. It's always the commissioner will make awards. So my question is, will this money, like currently right now, they make all of their recommendations and it comes to the legislature for a yes or up or down vote? Is that being done away with? It is no longer coming back through the legislature for an up or down vote, or is the commissioner, the council and the commissioner making the actual awards?
Ms. Robinson?
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the committee. So currently, the DNR works closely with a number of other legislatively named bodies, such as the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, in this case, the LCCMR. In that case, for example, the LCCMR makes recommendations on the bill, and that bill goes through the legislative process. In this case, my understanding is the DNR will work closely, is appropriated the funds, and then will work with the council in an advisory capacity to determine how those funds should be distributed. And my understanding is that the DNR with the council will distribute the dollars according to how the council advises. And we look forward to building the programs with that council.
Thank you, Senator Barr. Senator Drazkowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, one of my questions or comments was around that, too. We, as I understand it, the executive branch will have complete control over this. Is that what we just heard?
Ms. Robinson.
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, I believe that the DNR will distribute the funds according to the advisory council's advice. So my understanding is that it would not come back to the legislature as a bill, but would be appropriated to the DNR and then distributed as grants.
So Madam Chair,
Senator Drazkowski.
thank you, Madam Chair. So Madam Chair, so what we are doing is we are doing it again, Madam Chair, like we have in this legislature for the last 4 months, again, taking authority for appropriation from the legislative branch and giving it to the executive branch. That's what this bill is doing. The people and the wisdom in our Constitution expected us to appropriate the money. And for us to not have we've got to pull together the wisdom here as a Senate, as a legislature, to involve more than one branch in this. And for those of you that are a Democrat, we have a Democrat governor now. Guess what? It could be a Republican governor someday or some other party someday. That is not a reason to simply just grant that branch all of this authority. And that's what this bill does. And we've done that on several bills so far. We are ceding our authority as a legislature to the executive branch. That's not the way to go. And then I'm looking at the submission of voters' language, members, on 1.25 of the bill. And, we could just simply put, shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to prefer chocolate? And it would have a really beautiful ring to it. I've never heard such eloquent, and this is good. I mean, this is set up to garner 99% of the vote, Madam Chair. I don't know who would be opposed to, protecting drinking water resources and the water quality of lakes, rivers, and streams, conserve wildlife habitat and natural areas. The Constitution is not going to protect drinking water sources. The Constitution is going to be amended to take some money out of this fund and give it to the DNR to distribute ostensibly for some of those reasons, but the Constitution itself is not going to protect drinking water sources. And so the voter is being led to believe in this language that they are somehow the Constitution is going to protect drinking water and all those other very nice sounding air quality and everything else there. I mean, the skids are greased for this one. If it goes to the voters, it's going to be overwhelming. I can see it already. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's worth going back to now. We've sort of moved on, and I think that that's a good thing. But you mentioned earlier about if people are paying attention or not, and I would like to sort of follow up with something Senator Drazkowski talks about and continues to talk about. I've been in this committee now for a long time listening, and I don't say anything because I don't want to provoke more arguments. But I do feel like it's important to be on record to say that it is completely inappropriate and just frankly disgusting to have everything that comes before our committee that has anything to do with equity be challenged by you in a way to say, what about the 82% of white people and why aren't they being represented? That's divisive. That's wrong. It's disgusting. It's dangerous. Also, I think it just completely disregards the history of our state. For the longest amount of time, they have been the primary decision makers. Even now, they hold the most amount of political power own the most amount of businesses, make primarily the most amount of wealth in the state. They are well represented. So every time we talk about maybe giving a voice to other groups, it does not mean we're being divided, but that I consistently hear over and over again, what about the 82% of white people in Minnesota? That is a problematic message. I can't stay quiet on all of it. I've been quiet about it the whole session because I know that this is stuff that you really love to get all excited about. But we also need to hear from the other people in the room that there's a lot of us that don't think it's okay. It's wrong. And I'm going to go back to the word dangerous. It's really dangerous. And I would like to watch our language in this committee about what we're advocating for and what the motivations are behind it. Thank you.
Senator Morrison.
Madam Chair, just very briefly, I just want to point out that the community grant program in total will be 1.5% of the value of the NRTF funds. So this is it's a tiny portion of what we're talking about. I just want to kind of level set there.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Hur, it says in lines 1.1, or I should say the new language that was put in on 1.12 to 1.16, the assets of the fund shall not be used for blank, 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 but it may be used to pay for research related to wastewater. And I'm wondering how much money are you talking about, or are they requesting, or somebody must be putting that language in there for a purpose. I would think we're already doing wastewater research through the University of Minnesota and other places, and we're, excuse me, we're not allowing this to go for other things, but yet we're going to single this area out. And I'm just curious as to who wants this.
Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Anderson. You're right. The University of Minnesota has done some remarkable wastewater research through the LCCMR process. And in this bill, the LCCMR process will still receive up to 5.5% of the trust fund value every year. And as a coalition and working with Senator Hur, we wanted to see that wastewater research continue. But what has made the coalition very nervous is what happened a few years ago, where the assets of the fund were used to pay bonds for what we would think of as capital investment wastewater infrastructure. And that's something that we're trying to keep out of the trust fund so that the research aspect can still go forward, but the capital investment might be better served in something like a robust bonding bill.
Senator Anderson.
So what are you suggesting that the amount of money that should come out of this fund be used as far as research? And you don't know.
Mr. Paulson.
Madam Chair and Senator Anderson, the LCCMR process is the one that recommends how much money goes to certain research projects, or this new Community Grants Advisory Council will make recommendations on how much money goes in that process. But I don't have a specific number for you.
No, Madam Chair, and
Senator
to the
Anderson.
testifier, I would think you would keep that part of the bill clean. Keep it out of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. All right. There being no further questions, Senator Hur, did you want to make your closing statement?
Well, thank you. Thank you, community members, for an engaged conversation. This is about taking care of our environment, and the smallest percentage are going to maybe giving community color a chance to contribute to our state in terms of stewardship. And so I think this is a good, excellent privilege to empower all of our community. You know, this environmental trust fund is to make sure that we have clean air and clean water and the natural resource that we have here, which is very, very beautiful. We love the air here. Even the winter, when the weather is cold, we still have great recreation out there to serve our community. And this is just to another layer, a small percentage, so that we can build the for our future and not dividing people. Said we only allow certain group of people to be steward of this land, but not the little one, not the indigenous one, even though this is your land, but you're not part of the stewardship. So we want to make sure that this is inclusive and build up our future generation in participation in betterment of our state. Perhaps maybe 50 years down the road, the legislation or this jurisdiction will change to empower that generation of people. But I'm honored that I am at this point in time to carry this bill, and I ask for your support.
All right, Senator Morrison moves that Senate File 2404 be recommended to pass as amended and be re-referred to the Committee on Rules. Roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Murphy,
Yes?
Vice Chair Mitchell,
Yes.
Lead Anderson,
No.
Senator Barr,
Nope.
Senator Carlson,
Yes.
Senator Swedzinski,
Yes.
Senator Drazkowski,
No.
Senator Fate, Senator Gustafson,
Yes.
Senator Jazinski, Senator Curran,
No.
Senator Lang, Senator May Quaid,
Aye.
Senator Morrison.
Aye.
There being 7 ayes and just 4 noes, the motion is adopted and you are on your way. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
We have one more bill before the committee today, and it's Senator Klein's bill, Senate File 1949. Senator Klein, I know you have awaited this hearing for a couple of weeks, and our committee spent more time than we anticipated on pensions this morning and on the last bill that we just listened to, and so our time today is limited. And I know that there was some conversation ahead of this, but we will only be here for about another half an hour, and I don't anticipate that we will finish this bill in that half an hour's time. If we do, that would be great, but I want to make sure that we have the bill presentation, that we hear your amendments, that we hear from your testifiers, and I am committed to completing the work on this bill, and I just want to be really clear about that as we get started.
Thank you,
Senator
Madam
Klein,
Chair.
welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee, and I appreciate any time that you're able to give me today. And I know for the committee members, Chair Murphy has asked us to bring this to your committee last when it is in the form that we are ready to present to the Senate. It has already been through Judiciary and Commerce and HHS, and from here it would only go to Taxes and Finance. And I believe we do have it, Chair Murphy, in respect to your wishes, in the form very close to where it would appear should we reach the Senate floor. Some introductory remarks, Madam Chair. I know it's been important to you from the start that this be more than just about legalizing sports wagering, that this actually be beneficial to the people of Minnesota, and I'm going to tell you why I think that is the case. I took this bill on this year for 2 reasons. One is that Minnesotans demand legalized sports wagering, and in many cases are already accessing sports wagering. They don't feel it's the role of the government to stand in their way, and it is the job of our legislature, if that's the case, to provide some basic consumer protections to ensure that wagering is safe, trustworthy, and has guardrails for problem wagering and underage use. The second and larger reason that I took on this bill this year is as a matter of historical justice. Tribal gaming in the state of Minnesota has restored financial independence, power, and basic services to our 11 tribes, which were devastated over the past 3 centuries. Protecting that exclusive right to gaming as it expands into new areas is essential to continuing that work. This bill is, has been amended along the way, but one principle which has never been violated nor will be violated is tribal exclusivity over these licenses. You may know that this bill enjoys the support of our major league sports franchises who have provided a letter. I believe you will hear in testimony today that the 2 tracks in Minnesota do not currently support this legislation. We have worked hard throughout session to try to garner that support and honor the fact that those are destinations in Minnesota that have a significant contribution to the Minnesota experience. I will be bringing an amendment today that I think is a good faith effort to try to accommodate and sustain the tracks, but I do not believe that even with that amendment, they will commit their support at this time. I also want to point out, again, to your concern about sort of doing right by Minnesotans with this, that the revenues from the sports wagering bill, 50% of them will go to the Commissioner of Human Services. Half of that will be for compulsive gambling treatment, and half of that will be to the National Council on Problem Gambling to raise awareness of problem gaming. The other half of revenues will go to Amateur Sports Integrity Commission, which will promote sports and activities targeting communities, particularly with a high rate of juvenile crime. With that, Madam Chair, I have 4 amendments, and they fall in sort of 4 basic categories, and I can speak to those if your committee wants to offer them.
Thanks, Senator Klein. I think that we should proceed with the amendments while we have you in the attention. And we do not have the amendments in our packet, so they're being distributed right now. And Senator Klein, I'm not sure in the order you want to proceed.
I would like to start with the A10, and if I could, I would ask Mr. Andy Plato, if he's present, to come and accompany me at the table while I do that.
We will distribute the A10, so members have that. Can I have a copy?
And I can speak to it whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
Senator Klein, why don't you proceed? I'll move the A10 so it's before us. Senator Klein, why don't you go ahead and explain
Yeah,
it?
so the A10 amendment is our, again, best faith effort to accommodate the experience of the horse tracks in Minnesota. It recognizes that a new form of gambling like mobile sports betting may have a negative impact on horse breeding and racing. To help offset any potential losses, the amendment does the following. It dedicates 30% of the state's total tax intake from mobile sports betting to a newly created horse racing economic development fund operated by the Minnesota Racing Commission to support racing at both of the Class A horse tracks. It also commits the first $20 million collected by that tax to be uncapped. Once the first $20 million is reached, the contribution to the new fund would be capped at $3 million a year. And it allows Minnesota residents to wager on races at Minnesota tracks through advanced deposit wagering platforms, something that the track industry has long asked for. And it does clarify that historic horse racing machines are currently illegal in the state. Madam Chair, I also want to point out within the A10, which I think will be of interest to your committee, that there are provisions about how these revenues will be spent that I think are salubrious for the horse racing industry. It will see, as you can see under paragraph E, it will fund mental health programs for jockeys, stewards, and backstretch employees. It will pay increases in compensation to backstretch employees. It will fund research projects conducted by persons affiliated with a university or research agency to study equine illness and disease, performance-related accidents and injuries, and improvements in breeding techniques. And there is a study that will come back to the legislature. These and other provisions within the A10, Madam Chair, speak, I think, to the concerns of this committee.
Thank you, Senator Klein. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Plato, if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Andy Plato. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Gaming Association. We have no position on this amendment. If it were to go on the bill, our support for the bill would remain.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, do you have questions about the A10? Seeing no questions, all those in favor of the A10 amendment, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed say no. And that amendment is adopted. We have an A7, an A8, and an A9 before us. Senator Klein.
I think the A8 will be quick.
So Senator Mitchell will move the A8 amendment. Senator Klein.
Madam Chair, it's a technical cleanup, a very limited policy change. Number of clarifying changes to the bill. Many of the changes ensure that the regulatory requirements apply to both license holders, tribes, and also their mobile platform partners. On line 6, page 3, it changes the commissioner's rule-making requirements from a must to a may. The commissioner is still able to make rules, but it is not required. Page 9, line 4, ensures that all license holders start on the same date so that nobody gets a head start and an advantage in that regard. On page 9, line 10, it allows the platform provider licenses to be transferred with permission from the commissioner. Page 11, line 3 adds the ability to forego a criminal history check if the employee in question has already had that check in another state within the last 12 months. Page 11, line 20, this applicability section clarifies that licensing requirements can only apply to those who work full-time on the sports betting operation and not to tribal leaders, members, hotel, or casino staff that do not work on sports betting. And lastly, page 22, line 20, new language is added that clarifies how platforms and license holders need to ensure that they can pay bets through bonds, letters of credit, and other mechanisms rather than cash reserves. Fairly technical, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Klein. Senator Klein, our counsel, Stephanie James, has an oral amendment for your consideration. Ms. James?
Madam Chair and members, this would just be to use the kind of vernacular that we typically use. So on lines 1.3 to 1.4, on line 1.3, delete promulgate and insert adopt rules, and then on line 1.4, delete a regulation. So it'll read, shall not adopt rules setting a minimum hold requirement.
With that, Senator Klein, thumbs up, will incorporate that into the A8 amendment. Are there questions on the A8? Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, say no. That amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, the A7.
Just hold one moment, Senator Klein. Senator Klein, can we move to the, all right, hold on. We have the wrong amendment distributed, so we're going to get the right one before you, Senator Klein, or before the committee members.
This used to be the NCAA right now. Yeah, Big Ten. That's changing to the Big Ten.
Senator Klein, the A7.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. This was a request from the University of Minnesota in terms of sort of enforcing codes of conduct for participants in sporting events at the collegiate level. The original language in the bill said that the NCAA would sort of monitor that. They would prefer that the Big Ten authorize and oversee that, and that's what the A7 does. It makes that shift at the behest of the University of Minnesota.
Senator Mitchell moves the A7 amendment before us. Members, do you have questions? All right, then. Seeing no questions, Senator Mitchell moves the A7. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed, say no. And that amendment is adopted. And before us then is the A9. And
Thank you,
Senator
and I'll-
Mitchell will move the A9 amendment.
So, Madam Chair, this is the real meat before your committee today, the A9. It adds us a number of essential consumer protections that I think will satisfy many of your concerns. Changes on page 7, remove the mandate for the DPS commissioner to adopt rules on advertising content restriction and limitations on the total number of wagers placed by consumers. It grants the commissioner discretion on whether to make rules related to advertising frequency. It changes the existing advertising restrictions in the bill, which were places like buses, taxis, and airport, to more targeted advertising restrictions on college campuses. It creates a new section that adds the 1-800-GAMBLER helpline to be included in all advertisements. It also adds new language that would allow players on a mobile app to set self-imposed limits on how much time they spend on the apps and how much money they spend on the apps. And then on page 2089, deletes the prohibition on push notifications from mobile sports betting apps, but adds in an opt-in requirement to get those push notifications. These add common sense protections for Minnesotans while also ensuring that the new industry will be capable of attracting gamblers away from, or wagerers away from the illicit market and into this more structured legal market.
Thank you, Senator Klein. Members, do you have questions? Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a large fiscal note, and I'm just wondering if Fiscal could give me just like just the big highlight. You have to go through all 56 pages.
So if it is okay, I do want Andrew Erickson to go through the fiscal note, but could we finish the work on the amendment?
Madam Chair, I apologize. I thought we had adopted that amendment.
There you go. There you go. That's how that goes. So I do want us to make sure we do the fiscal note and the testimony before we wrap up today. Maybe we'll get through everything, but members, do you have questions on the A9 amendment? Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no, and that motion is adopted. Mr. Erickson, to the fiscal note.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I will do my best on this one. I do apologize that I haven't had a chance to sort of internalize and mentally engross some of the changes in the amendment, so I apologize if any of this is stale information. You should have in front of you the fiscal note for Senate File 1949, the 2A. There are several components of the bill that are in the state government area. While the Department of Public Safety is not in the state government area, that's the lead agency on the fiscal note, and that takes up the first several pages. I will pass on that, other than to note to you all that if you're looking for a reporting of several of the revenues that the bill generates, you can find them in here, and the LBO has incorporated those into the fiscal note for purposes of pricing the overall bill, rather than the strict revenue estimate fiscal note process we often see. The first agency that is in the state government area is going to be on page 18, the Office of Administrative Hearings. And as we've seen in many cases this year, this is a revolving cost for the Office of Administrative Hearings related to appeals and rulemaking, for which the agencies who are having those things have to pay into the revolving special revenue fund account for that. On page 21 is the Amateur Sports Commission. And what you will see here, it will actually appear in a couple of other spots as well. There's an appropriation in the bill to the Amateur Sports Commission, but if there are costs in the fiscal note that are over and above the available appropriation, the fiscal note assumes that as a general fund appropriation. So in this case, at the end of a biennium, or a year, now I'm forgetting what it was in the bill, the special revenue account into which all of the fees are deposited is zeroed out, and half of that goes to the Amateur Sports Commission and half to the Department of Human Services. I believe that was changed in the A10 amendment, and there's now a portion that is first gone to the Racing Commission and then out. So this bill this fiscal note assumes that 50% number and has that going to the Amateur Sports Commission for grants. The MASC has a 4% allowance for administrative costs. That amount is more, or is not enough to cover what they anticipate being the total cost there. So you'll see the general fund is what would be required to fill that up. I know that was a little bit of a complicated thing, but I promise you finance will sort a lot of this stuff out. And there's several tables on the ensuing pages that talk about what the Amateur Sports Commission sees as those needs for FTE software grant making, and then the amounts going out for grants. On page 26, the next agency in the state government area is the Attorney General, and again, we've seen notes similar to this year. The Attorney General is expected to be involved in negotiating compacts and anything where they would have to step in as the state's attorney representing various agencies who may face litigation. The fiscal note reports that as an expected number of hours and calls it sort of a billable hours. There would be an option to fund that amount or for it to be absorbed into the Attorney General's existing appropriation to defend those claims in court. Moving to page, let's see, not 30 is correction, page 32, the governor's office has an absorbed cost, unlike several of the times where we've seen that being because they are making appointments and absorbing that cost. This is instead related to the responsibility of negotiating the compacts with tribes, delegating that authority to an appropriate commissioner, but the governor's office legal team expects to be involved, and so there will be a small $17,000 absorbed cost there. I will skip over the Human Services Department because it's not in this area, but it has a similar situation to the Amateur Sports Commission in that they get the other portion of the balance of the fund at the end and have administrative costs that are permitted to be carried out of that. On page 38 is Minnesota Management and Budget. This fiscal note does not report any costs that MMB sees accruing to them. I do think it's useful to see in some of the assumptions that MMB has identified some potential cash flow issues in the current fund, in the funding mechanisms that exist in the bill. On the one hand, it is not clear that there will be enough funding in the special revenue account at the beginning of the biennium to help begin implementing some of these things. So there may need to be, again, in finance, some sort of work to get an amount put in, and then either cash flow authorization to perform the work that will be paid back, or alternatively, a general fund appropriation, something along those lines. The other cash flow issue arises when, at the end of a biennium, when the special revenue account is zeroed out, the agencies that are funded out of that will need some sort of money in the ensuing weeks when that money's been canceled. So there may need to be, again, some sort of carry forward authority or a little delayed cancellation of that balance just for cash flow purposes. Doesn't necessarily affect the overall cost of the bill. So again, MMB reporting is zero, but has sort of a detailed discussion of those cash flow issues. And then the Department of Revenue on page 44 is in the state government area. This is another one where in that, in page 30, there's an appropriation, a statutory appropriation for revenues costs. That amount pays for the first amount of their cost, but they do report a cost over and above that amount that, at least for purposes of the general fund, is being assumed as a general fund appropriation that would be needed to fill up their needs. And Madam Chair, I think that is the last agency in state government's area. So maybe that wasn't quite as quick as Senator McQuaid had hoped that I would go through that, but I hope that covered what you were looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson, and I appreciate you flagging the MMB issues. Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under the Attorney General, it says that Article 4 creates an amateur sports integrity and participation account. Is that in the county Attorney General's office, or will that be under administration? I mean, that's where that's where Article 4 shows it being established. But I'm just wondering if that would be administration taking care of this or not.
Mr. Erickson?
Madam Chair and Senator Anderson, I think I would defer to the bill author. I haven't fully explored that cranny of the bill.
And Senator Anderson, if you could just repeat your question, that'd be great. Could you repeat your question, please?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Klein, it shows here, as Mr. Erickson was going through the bill under the Attorney General, Article 4 shows that creating an amateur sports integrity and participation account. And I'm wondering if that is underneath the Attorney General, since that's what it was, that's where it's located here. But I'm wondering if it would be the Department of Administration that would be taking care of that account.
Senator Klein?
Madam Chair and Senator Anderson, it appears to me from reading subdivision 2 that it would be under the authority of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. So that's my understanding.
Could you repeat that again?
Yes,
Senator
it looks
Klein.
like it's under the, Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, it looks like it's under the authority of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission.
And that would be located in the Department of Administration?
Senator Anderson, that is a separate agency. Go ahead, Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair and Senator Anderson, I apologize for misunderstanding the question the first time. Senator Klein's exactly right that the account would be created at the Amateur Sports Commission, which is its own standalone state agency for purposes of the committee. It's sort of, if you're thinking mentally about the spreadsheet, it kind of comes after the gambling boards. But it is its own thing, not under the Department of Administration.
Madam Chair?
Senator Anderson.
And Madam Chair, Senator Klein, is that sports integrity and participation account, is that like a account that's going to help with, like for gambling problems or people that have problems with gambling?
Senator Klein.
Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, no, it is not. So there's two sort of basic pots of where the revenues from this wagering are going to go. One is to precisely your concern, grants to the Commissioner of Human Services to address problem gambling, sustain services for problem gambling, and raise awareness of problem gambling. The other 50% will go to this amateur sports integrity account, which will promote and advance sports participation in communities, particularly communities with high levels of juvenile crime. So trying to use it to sustain youth sports essentially in the state of Minnesota as an alternative to other activities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to invite testimony. We have a number of people on the list, starting with Mr. Plato.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Andy Plato. I serve as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Gaming Association, or MIGA. On behalf of MIGA's 9 member tribes, thank you for your consideration of Senate File 1949, a bill to legalize sports wagering. Since the Murphy v. NCAA Supreme Court decision in 2018, MIGA tribes and their leaders have monitored the impact legal sports betting has had on existing gaming operations in other states. Most importantly, those operations run by tribal governments. The experiences and lessons learned elsewhere have helped MIGA tribes understand just how important the details and structure of legislation authorizing sports wagering are to existing gaming interests like tribal governments. Were Senate File 1949, as amended today, to become law, MIGA tribes believe the resulting mobile and retail markets operated by Minnesota's tribal nations would not only support tribes, but would also provide a well-regulated and accessible market for sports bettors and a competitive market that is important to our state's professional sports teams and market partners. Gaming revenues produce the essential tax base tribes rely on to fund basic and essential government services for thousands of tribal members. And anytime the state changes the gaming landscape, tribes must carefully consider whether such proposals strengthen or in fact threaten tribal sovereignty and self-determination. MIGA tribes look forward to continually monitoring the bill's progress and offering refinements to improve the language as it moves through the process. MIGA, its members and representatives, again, thank Senator Klein, Chair Murphy, and the full State and Local Government and Veterans Committee for recognition that tribal gaming deserves to be protected and must be preserved. As the proposal moves through the legislature, we look forward to working with you and other stakeholders. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plato. I have Tracy Wilson and Randy Sampson next. Welcome to the committee, and please introduce yourself for the record and proceed. You'll probably have to lean into those mics, into that mic.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair Murphy, and members of the committee for letting me speak today. My name is Tracy Wilson, and I'm the CFO of Running Aces. I'm here today because it is essential that the state's 2 racetracks be treated fairly with respect to any sports betting expansion. I would like to thank Senator Klein for including the state's 2 racetracks in the latest bill language. This is the first time we've seen the racetracks referenced in the legislation, and we appreciate that. It is important to understand that the Minnesota racing industry has been taking sports bets on horse racing since the mid-'80s when it was legalized. In 1982, Minnesotans approved sports wagering on horse racing by a 64% majority. We already have experience with this technology and the vendors that would be used for sports betting. Specifically, Running Aces has taken over 10 million sports bets on horse racing alone since opening in April '08, while Canterbury has been taking sports bets on horse racing for almost 40 years. The horse racing industry is estimated to bring in over $500 million economic benefit to the state of Minnesota. Specifically, Running Aces employs over 600 employees, supporting payroll over $27 million. If this bill is passed, all constituents, the racetracks and Native American casinos, need to be treated fairly. Minnesotans overwhelmingly agree. According to an April 2022 KSTP Survey USA poll, 57% of respondents say they support sports betting in Native American casinos and the state's 2 horse tracks. Just 7% of respondents support sports betting only at Native American casinos. To our knowledge, in all states with legalized sports wagering, racetracks have not been prohibited from participating in sports wagering. Minnesota should be no different. While we appreciate Senator Klein's efforts, Running Aces will need to find other sources of revenue to offset the lost revenue with the current version of the sports betting bill. Sports betting will result in a significant loss of revenue for Running Aces. The tracks stand to lose revenues that are necessary to sustain the track's entire operations in order to support horse racing. We need to remain viable into the future and need an ongoing revenue source to compensate for the loss in revenue as a result of the sports betting, the largest expansion in over 40 years. One option under the sports betting bill that was considered last year was to allow craps and roulette at the state's 2 racetracks and at the Native American casinos. This would provide a revenue source that would help all constituents. The financial compensation from the current legislation is too limited to be effective. While we oppose the amendment in its current form, we will continue to seek a solution that keeps the horse racing industry viable. In summary, if our racetrack is excluded from a sports betting expansion that is fair to all, this will endanger the future of the over 500 million horse racing industry in Minnesota. We are asking today for fairness. We will continue to work with all stakeholders to find a solution that is fair to all. Thank you for your time today, and I will be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Randy Sampson. I am the Chairman and CEO of Canterbury Park, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and make some comments on behalf of Canterbury as well as our thoroughbred and quarter horse horsemen. Parimutuel horse racing was the first form of gaming approved by the state of Minnesota in a 1982 constitutional amendment vote, and then in 1985, Canterbury Downs opened for business. In 1989, the tribal gaming facilities were approved by state tribal gaming compacts and resulted in the largest expansion of gaming in Minnesota history. In 1992, Canterbury Downs closed due largely to an inability to compete with the tribal casinos and the lottery, which was approved in 1988. In 94, our ownership group of Minnesota Horsemen was able to purchase and reopen the racetrack as Canterbury Park. Since that time, we have continued to see dramatic growth in the very successful tribal gaming industry, and we now have 2 racetracks with cardroom operations that help support purses in an agricultural industry. This approach of successful tribal and racetrack gaming has resulted in economic benefits that have reached all corners of the state, and we feel strongly that any effort to add sports betting to the gaming options in Minnesota needs to protect the interests of the racetracks and horse industry as well as the tribal governments and the sports teams. For the horse industry nationally, continued success comes from complementary gaming options that are used to grow and sustain purses that attract investments by breeders, owners, and trainers. Adding new gaming options at Canterbury Park has never proved to be a threat to tribal gaming. These options just provide a different type of economic development. On the other hand, as the state contemplates approving the second largest expansion of gaming ever through mobile sports betting, history has shown that this type of expansion of gambling will cause the loss of significant economic benefit to the Minnesota horse industry and the state of Minnesota. Sports betting in other states has resulted in minimal decreases in slot revenue. However, wagering on horse racing and table games, as we have at our racetracks, has seen a much larger negative impact. Our message on this issue has consistently been that the horse industry is an important stakeholder in the Minnesota gaming industry and should be included in the discussions of the best way for the state to implement sports betting. While we are very appreciative of Senator Klein's amendment to this sports betting bill that will include support for the horse racing industry, we are expressing our opposition to the bill today. We received the racing amendment yesterday and look forward to the opportunity for the horse industry and Minnesota Racing Commission to provide input as to the amendment language. While this amendment would provide a meaningful level of support for the horse industry for a few years, our main concern is that it creates a funding cliff by putting a future cap of $3 million per year on the horse racing industry economic development fund. That amount, when split between 2 racetracks and 3 horseman groups, would not be adequate to provide the level of support needed to keep horse racing in Minnesota viable in the face of the expansion of gambling that mobile sports betting will produce. Similar to the increases we have seen in competition from internet wagering on horse racing, we believe that sports wagering will continue to increase over time, as will the negative impact on horse racing. Unfortunately, in its current form, we believe this amendment provides a short-term solution to a long-term concern and problem, and it will require that we need to continue this debate in future legislative sessions to address what we see as the impending funding cliff when the cap takes effect. Also, we believe it's in the best interest of the state for all the stakeholders to work together to make sports betting successful. Putting a cap on the revenues to the horse racing industry does not provide the incentive needed for a collaborative approach. We look forward to the opportunity to have input regarding options for providing needed protection for the interests of the horse industry and the economic benefits that it provides to Minnesota. We believe a bill that provides meaningful benefits to horse racing as well as tribal governments and sports teams will result in the broadest possible economic benefits to the state. If all stakeholders are willing to work together, I'm confident we can find solutions that will be a win for the tribes, the teams, the tracks, and the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Appreciate that. We have 2 more people on the list to testify. Pat Gibbs, and following that, Jake Grassel. Welcome to the committee. If you'd like to introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you. Chair Murphy, members of the Senate State and Local Government and Veterans Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of mobile sports wagering, and thank you to Senator Klein and the other supporters championing this effort. My name is Pat Gibbs. I'm an attorney with the law firm Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe. It is my pleasure to serve as National Public Policy Counsel for the Sports Betting Alliance, or SBA. The SBA is a trade organization comprised of many of the top companies in the mobile sports betting industry: DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, and Fanatics. Together, our members advocate for competitive mobile sports wagering in the United States. The SBA is involved in nearly every state legislature's conversations on this topic since the Supreme Court struck down an unconstitutional federal law prohibiting states from authorizing sports wagering. Currently, 36 states plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico authorize some form of sports wagering, with a majority of these allowing for statewide mobile. I know we're running pretty short on time today, so I'll keep my comments brief, but wanted to make myself available if you have any questions or would like perspective on other states.
Appreciate your testimony. I hope you're having fun in Minnesota.
I'm from here, so yes.
So you're having so much fun then. Mr. Grassel.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jake Grassel, and I'm here today on behalf of Citizens Against Gambling Expansion to speak in opposition to Senate File 1949. I think the only testifier not from a gambling organization. As this bill purports to be a regulatory mechanism to bring illegal gambling out of the shadows, unfortunately what it is the largest expansion of gambling in the past 40 years in our state. We hear it's fun, it's shiny, the NFL supports it. They stand to make $1 billion across the nation, yet won't allow their personnel to gamble on any sport. We haven't fully digested the A9 amendment yet today. We look forward to doing that, but unfortunately from first blush, we feel that it does not make the bill stronger. It makes the bill worse on consumer protections, especially on the self-imposed versus a true hard cap on when you deposit money, not being able to go access it. That is the worry. You know, people who aren't problem gamblers, they're fine putting in self-imposed caps. It's the worry of the youth in the community that are in the football stadium, deposit the money, make a bet, and lose their money. And that's what our worry about this bill is. It being a large expansion of gambling, largest in our states, and we really worry that the first time ever going to the online mobile, those lead to even higher problems of gambling rates, 18%. And further, sports better have higher rates of problem gambling at 5.7% compared with adults that bet at casinos, bought lottery tickets and raffle tickets, or made private bets. The annual cost of the state of Minnesota due to crime, business, employment costs, bankruptcy, illness, social services, family costs, it just aren't worth it. This bill is not ready. It's been through a lot of committees. It's changing, every single time. This bill is not ready. It's not needed, and the cost to our society far outweigh any benefits. I would urge you to refer this perhaps to a task force to study this and find out what it truly means for the average Minnesotan. I believe such a task force would find, as I think you should as well, that this bill is a bad bet for the people of Minnesota, and we'd encourage your opposition to this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate that. It is, it's 1:25. This bill came through the legislature fairly swiftly a year ago. And Senator Klein has been, I think, methodical in moving and amending and considering people's perspectives. And in honor of that, we are not going to finish the bill today because I want to make sure that the members here have time to ask their questions. And because the day has just gone much beyond what we expected. And I did talk with Senator Klein, our staffs talked together ahead of this to let him know. It would be my intention today to lay this on the table. I've made a commitment that we're going to come back and we're going to finish it, and hopefully early next week, because I know you have further stops. But I think it would be better that we have given members the time to consider the proposal and consider the work that Senator Klein has done than to push it through this committee. And I want to make sure that members have time to ask their questions. And so with that, at this point, Senator Klein, do you have anything more you'd like to say? So we've got the bill in its shape, which is good work. But anything more that you want to say to the committee before we lay the bill on the table today?
Madam Chair and Committee, I'm grateful for the time you've given to this today, and I actually agree with you. This is a significant change for the state of Minnesota. This is the last policy committee in which it will be heard, and we should do it right rather than do it fast. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So members, with no other questions, then I'm going to move to lay Senate File 1949 over, lay it on the table, and we're going to come back to it and finish it up yet this year. There being no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.